92%, that was the death rate. For every 100 Sherman Firefly crews that rolled into battle during the Second World War, 92 never made it home. They were burned alive in steel coffins, torn apart by shells, or simply vanished in the mud of Normandy and beyond. The Firefly itself was an extraordinary machine, a British answer to a nightmare. At its heart was a single gun, the fearsome 17-pounder, a weapon capable of killing the German Tiger tank, a monster most Allied soldiers believed was invincible. For the first time, British crews could fight on equal terms with the armored beasts of the Reich, but that power came with a curse. German commanders quickly learned to spot the Firefly among other Shermans. Its long barrel stood out like a spear, and its reputation as the Tiger Killer made it priority target number 1. Firefly crews knew the moment they drove forward, they had painted a bullseye on their own backs. And yet, they went. They fought in towns reduced to rubble, in hedgerows thick with smoke, in fields where the only cover was the wreck of another tank. Their chances of survival were almost non-existent, but their mission to pierce the iron heart of Hitler's war machine could not be abandoned. This is the story of why they climbed in anyway. Summer 1944. The world was holding its breath. The Allies had just torn open a hole in Hitler's fortress Europe with the D-Day landings. But Normandy was not yet won. The coast was only the beginning. Beyond the beaches stretched a maze of hedgerows, ancient earthen walls, and thick green brush that turned every field into a fortress. Tanks could barely see more than a few yards ahead. Every corner might hide a German gun. And in those hedgerows lurked the shadow of terror, the Tiger and Panther tanks. Heavy, thick-skinned, armed with 88mm cannons that could slice through Allied Shermans from over a mile away. To the men on the ground, they seemed unstoppable. Stories spread of Shermans firing 5, 6, even 10 shots, all bouncing harmlessly off the German armor. For the Allies, this was more than a tactical problem. If they failed in Normandy, the dream of liberating France could collapse. Hitler would be given time to regroup, and the war could drag on for years, bleeding nations dry. For the Germans, Normandy was their last chance to hold the line in the West. Every Tiger tank was a symbol of defiance, every hedgerow a delaying wall that might buy them precious time. Into this desperate battlefield rolled the Sherman Firefly, a tank that finally gave Allied crews a fighting chance. But that chance came at a terrible price. Because while the Firefly could kill a tiger the moment it appeared on the battlefield, it was marked for death. The Firefly was never meant to exist. When the United States designed the original Sherman, it was supposed to be the workhorse of the Allied armies, fast, reliable, and easy to build in massive numbers. But the Americans had gambled on numbers over power. Their 75mm gun could destroy bunkers and infantry, but against a Tiger or Panther, it was like throwing stones at a wall of iron. It was Britain that saw disaster coming. Reports from North Africa and the Eastern Front told the same story. German armor was evolving faster than anyone had expected. By 1943, British commanders feared that when the invasion of France finally came, their Shermans would be slaughtered before they could even reach the front line. The solution came not from grand strategy, but from a handful of stubborn engineers. The 17-pounder, a British anti-tank gun, had proven it could pierce even the Tiger's armor. The problem was fitting it inside a Sherman turret that was far too small for it. Most experts said it couldn't be done. But Major George Bridie and Lieutenant Colonel George Witheridge refused to listen. Working in secrecy, they stripped out parts of the turret, rotated the gun sideways, and even stored the radio in a box on the back of the tank. It was a crude, improvised fix, but it worked. The Sherman Firefly was born. Crews selected for these tanks knew exactly what they were being asked to do. Training was short, often rushed, and the men were made painfully aware of the risks. The Firefly's gun made it a prize target. German intelligence quickly warned their troops. Destroy the long-barreled Shermans first, at any cost. Still, for the British tank regiments preparing for Normandy, the Firefly was a lifeline. Without it, they would be sending their men into certain slaughter. With it, they had at least a sliver of hope. The days before combat were filled with quiet tension. Mechanics worked late into the night, tightening bolts, checking engines, making sure the long 17-pounder wouldn't jam at the critical moment. Crews whispered about what awaited them across the channel. Stories of tigers prowling the French countryside, entire Sherman squadrons wiped out in minutes. And yet, there was also a grim resolve. The men knew they were part of something bigger than themselves. If they broke through Normandy, the road to Paris would open. If they failed, the war might be lost. On the eve of battle, the Firefly stood ready in their camouflaged positions, engines silent, barrels pointed toward the dark horizon. The waiting was over. The first shots were only moments away. Dawn, June 1944. The invasion of Normandy had begun. All across the French coast, the thunder of naval guns shook the earth. Waves of Allied infantry fought their way ashore, clinging to the beaches under a storm of machine gun fire. Behind them waited the tanks, the Shermans and Fireflies that would be needed to punch through the German lines once the foothold was secured. But Normandy was no ordinary battlefield. The countryside was a patchwork of hedgerows, thick walls of earth, and centuries-old brush, some higher than a man, some taller than a tank. To the British and Americans, they were an unexpected nightmare. Tanks could not see beyond the next corner. Infantry moved through narrow lanes that turned into kill zones. Every advance risked walking straight into an ambush. The Germans knew this land intimately. They had mined the roads, dug hidden gun pits, and sighted their panzers at angles where they could strike and vanish. For every Sherman that rumbled forward, there seemed to be a Panther waiting in silence, its gun barrel already aligned. Firefly crews learned quickly that their reputation had preceded them. The long 17-pounder barrel that made them deadly also made them obvious. German gunners would scan for it first, ignoring regular Shermans to knock out the Fireflies before they could even fire a shot. Some crews smeared mud along their barrels to disguise them, hoping to delay recognition for a few precious seconds. At first, there were moments of triumph. A Firefly hidden in a hedgerow knocked out a Tiger at nearly 1,000 yards, a feat that spread like wildfire among Allied units, proving the beast could be killed. Crews cheered, morale surged, and for a moment it seemed the tide might turn. But victories were fleeting. For every Tiger destroyed, Allied crews paid dearly. Many Fireflies never fired a single shot before being reduced to blackened wrecks. German counterattacks came swiftly, often at night, when the fields lit up with tracer fire and burning tanks cast flickering shadows across the hedgerows. The smell of gasoline and scorched rubber hung heavy in the air. For the men inside the Fireflies, survival depended on nerves of steel. Every creak of a branch, every flicker of movement could mean the next shell was already inbound. Sweat dripped into their eyes as they gripped controls, waiting for the order to fire, knowing that once they revealed their position, they would be hunted without mercy. The Allies had landed. They had pierced the first line. But Normandy was not yet a breakthrough. It was a trap, a labyrinth of death, where the Firefly's strength was also its curse. The real battle, the one that would decide who lived and who burned, was only just beginning. The hedgerows were burning. By July 1944, Normandy had become a slaughterhouse. The fields were littered with twisted wrecks of Shermans, half-tracks, and German armor alike. Black smoke rose in pillars that stained the sky, and the smell of cordite and burned flesh never left the air. A Firefly crew waited in silence, their tank hidden beneath a canopy of leaves. Sweat poured down their faces as the gunner peered through the scope, searching the lane ahead. Then movement, a shadow. The unmistakable silhouette of a tiger emerging through the haze. Target Tiger, front. The commander's voice snapped like a whip. The gunner adjusted. Heartbeats stretched into eternity. The 17-pounder roared. The shell screamed across the field, piercing the Tiger's side armor in a blinding flash. A fireball erupted, the massive beast lurching to a halt. Inside the Firefly, the men cheered, then fell silent, because they knew that shot had betrayed them. The Tiger was dead, but the pack was alive. Panthers moved in from the flank, guns already swinging toward the Firefly's muzzle flash. The first round struck nearby, spraying the crew with dirt and stone. The second hit closer, slamming into the earth just short of the hull. The third found its mark. Impact. Metal shrieked. The Firefly jolted violently as the shell punched through its armor. Fuel ignited. In seconds, the inside of the tank became an oven. The driver screamed. The loader clawed at the hatch. Flames consumed them before they could escape. Elsewhere, another Firefly lay in wait. Its barrel trained through a narrow gap. The gunner steadied his breath, ignoring the chaos around him. He fired once. A Panther burst into flames. He reloaded, fired again. Another German machine ground to a halt, but his luck lasted only minutes. A hidden anti-tank gun dug into the hedgerow, fired a single round that split the Firefly open like paper. Everywhere across Normandy, the story was the same. Kill, be killed, vanish in fire. The noise was unrelenting. The crash of tank shells, the stuttering of machine guns, the roar of engines straining in mud. Men inside the tanks heard little but ringing in their ears, and the suffocating hiss of smoke filling their lungs. They fought half-blind, half-deaf, on instinct alone. Yet through the chaos came moments of raw bravery. Crews pressed forward even as their comrades burned. Infantry huddled behind advancing Fireflies, trusting the long 17-pounder to silence the Panthers before they could strike. Medics crawled into burning wrecks, dragging out survivors with uniforms still smoldering. German crews were no less desperate. For them, every loss of a Tiger was irreplaceable. They shifted positions constantly, striking then vanishing, trying to lure Fireflies into kill zones. Some tanks fought until their last shell was gone, then detonated charges inside to deny the Allies a prize. The battle stretched for hours that felt like days. The fields were no longer green but black, churned to ash and soil soaked in blood and oil. And slowly, a realization spread on both sides. The Allies had numbers. The Germans had skill and machines of terror. But the Firefly had something else, the power to kill the beast. For every Firefly destroyed, another appeared. For every Tiger that fell, the myth of invincibility cracked a little more. The turning point was near. Not victory, not yet, but inevitability. The Fireflies would not all survive. In fact, almost none of them would. But their sacrifice had lit a path through the darkness of Normandy. The outcome was no longer in doubt. By the end of July, the hedgerows of Normandy were silent again. The thunder of tank guns faded, leaving only the hiss of fires smoldering in the wrecks. Fields that once grew wheat and corn were now graveyards of steel, Shermans, Panthers, Tigers, all reduced to twisted hulks. The ground itself was blackened, the air heavy with the stench of oil and death. The cost was staggering. Allied tank units reported losses of nearly half their strength in some regiments. For Firefly crews, the toll was worse. Of every 100 that had driven into Normandy, 92 never returned. Burned alive, blown apart, or buried beneath the earth, their lives were spent in days, sometimes in minutes. And yet, their sacrifice was not in vain. German commanders were forced to admit what they once thought impossible: the Tiger could be killed. Each Firefly round that found its mark chipped away at the myth of invincibility. Each burning Tiger was a blow to German morale and a warning that the Allies were no longer helpless prey. Some names surviving the records. Sergeant Joe Atkins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry, a Firefly gunner, would become legendary for destroying 3 Tigers in a single day, including the tank of Germany's most celebrated ace, Michael Wittmann. But for most crews, there were no names remembered, only numbers carved into stone memorials. Normandy was won. The breakout from the hedgerows opened the road to Paris, and from Paris the road to Germany itself. The war was far from over, but its direction had changed. Behind that turning point lay the wreckage of Fireflies, silent now, their long barrels still pointing east. They had done their part. At terrible cost, they had helped break Hitler's iron grip on Europe. Today, the Sherman Firefly stands in museums and memorials, its long barrel still unmistakable. To casual eyes, it is just another tank. But to those who know, it is a symbol of courage, of sacrifice, and of the brutal arithmetic of war. The Firefly changed the battlefield. Its presence forced German commanders to adapt to fear what had once been easy prey. It proved that no weapon, no matter how mighty, was beyond destruction. And yet, its true legacy lies not in steel or strategy, but in the men who climbed inside despite knowing the odds. 92%. That number lingers like a shadow. For every name remembered, there were dozens who vanished without witness, their final moments swallowed by fire and smoke. They were not heroes in marble statues. They were ordinary men, sent to face monsters in machines built to kill them. Their fight helped break the back of Hitler's empire, opening the path to liberation across Europe. But the cost echoes still. It is written in the quiet rows of graves that line the French countryside, and in the silence of fireflies that will never roar again. History remembers the victories, but the firefly reminds us of the price. Sometimes, to kill a monster, you must first become its prey.